Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me this evening for a second episode in a series I'm calling Conversations with Alan. There's a quote in the Talmud: whoever saves a life saves the world. This quote hits home for me personally, as my life story is one that could have turned out quite differently, if not for some very brave men and women who risked their lives and the lives of their families to save my mother and father when the Nazis started rounding up Jews for deportation to concentration camps during World War II. Tonight, I'm going to share my mother's personal journey of survival and talk about those brave men and women who are the reason my sister and I are alive today. Joining me tonight for an interview later in the show are the granddaughters of that family who risked everything for my mother and grandmother to survive. Their one act of humanity not only saved two lives, but brought two otherwise unconnected families together and created a bond that has continued on 75 years after the war through the next generation and hopefully through the future generations to come. I share this story with all of you so that we never forget what happened to the 6 million Jews. And remember, whoever saves a life saves the world. When I saw the footage from the rally in Charlottesville, Virginia in August of 2017, when hundreds of white nationalists, alt-righters, and neo-Nazis were marching in the streets and chanting, "Jews will not replace us," my heart basically stopped. Seeing these events unfold before my eyes lit something inside of me. I felt the need to speak up and use my voice where my parents no longer could. This was the first time in my life where I was happy that neither of them were alive to witness what was happening. I can't imagine what it would have been like sitting next to them with my parents, watching those men holding those tiki torches, chanting those words, "Jews will not replace us," so many years after they lost so much. I lost my grandfather, my mother's father, and my aunt, my dad's sister, along with so many other relatives during World War II at the hand of the Nazis. My parents surely understood that anti-Semitism still existed, and we have all watched horrible anti-Semitic attacks unfold in Kansas, Charlottesville, and Pittsburgh, to name a very small few. I can't sit idly by and do nothing. Here we are, 75 years since the end of World War II, and we have yet to rid the world of Hitler's propaganda and violence, especially here in the United States of America. Let's remember, whoever saves a life saves the world. I started Conversations with Alan to have conversations to make us all think about our own place in history. As you listen to my mother's story I share tonight and about those brave men and women who changed the trajectory of my life, consider this. What would you have done if my mother and grandmother showed up on your doorstep? The story I share illustrates difficult decisions and daring acts of compassion that took place to save my mother's life. My mother's story: at the start of World War II in Amsterdam, my mother was an only child living with her parents. Her parents owned and operated a fabric business. They were growing that business when the Nazi occupation began, and her world was turned upside down. The Nazis closed the business, confiscated their property, restricted their travel, and forced them to wear yellow Jewish stars. The Nazis began the deportation of Jewish people to concentration camps. My grandfather received a letter requiring him to work a camp at Westerbroek, Holland, to mine coal. He, like so many others, had no choice but to go. My mother was devastated, of course. She wanted to go see him. But anyone caught informing, helping, or hiding Jews during this time of war were killed. Her Christian aunt and uncle courageously stepped up and took her to see her dad one last time. This would be the last time she saw him alive. Fearing for the safety during the war, my mother and grandmother, with the help of the resistance, go into hiding. Fortunately for them, there was a network of people willing to help. These were everyday heroes, making choices that could lead to their death. The first person to offer help is a man named Hank. Hank welcomes them into his home where my mother felt safe, but only for a short while. They must move on from that first hiding spot to stay safe, sometimes sleeping against trees in the forest, as my mother would recall. Eventually, another man named Peter hides them in a horse-drawn cart in 1943 and brings them to safety in Bunschoten in Holland, a small and picturesque fishing and farming village southeast of Amsterdam. Peter brings them to the home of the Van der Geest family, who have a small working farm and 9 kids of their own, ages 6 to 19. It was their son Minor who persuaded his parents to hide my family from the Nazis. At just 17 years old, he went to his parents and asked them to take my mother and grandmother in, and they agreed, changing the course of all of our lives forever. Remember, what would you do? During their time living on the farm, they had to change their names. My mother lived, went to school, went to church with this family. This family kept them safe, kept them fed, kept them clothed, and most of all, kept them alive until the war ended in May of 1945. Understandably, we can all understand this. Minor became my mother's hero. After the film Schindler's List was released in 1993, the USC Foundation started capturing a visual and important history of the remaining survivors who were still alive and willing to share their personal stories. My sister and I convinced our parents to share theirs. Their stories and the stories of other survivors live on in Holocaust museums around the world so that we never let these kind of atrocities ever happen again. I share this clip of my mother now from the Shoah Foundation so you can hear some of the above story in her own words.
Do you have any memories of people talking about the Germans coming?
No, I was too young for that.
So you had no idea what it meant?
No, I was 3 years old. I remember riding my tricycle once, and the Germans came to pick up my mother.
So you knew that they were Germans?
Yeah, I knew they were.
Yeah.
We didn't like them, let's say, put it that way. And I was scared. I said, Mommy, are you coming back? And my mother had to ask them if she could tell me that she was coming back. And she did come back. But I remember living there. We lived in the attic. And
this is you and your mother?
Yeah. And sometime my grandfather was with us too, but I don't think there. And the Germans were in the house downstairs, inside, all around. There was a big street across the street. They had the little houses, and they were standing there with the guns and ammunition, whatever you call it. And I don't know how my mother kept me quiet in the attic, but and then we went from there to relatives from the people where we stayed to a farmer's place in Bunschoten with a horse and wagon.
A horse and wagon took you there?
Yeah.
And what was it like there?
That was a big family. They had 9 children. And the parents, they were a little leery to take us in. They were afraid. And I was a little more freer there. My mother stayed in the house, and I was very friendly with the youngest daughter. And I went to church with them, and I did everything they did. I rode the horses, I played in the hay, and one day I remember being in the basement that we all had to hide.
All
and it was a little
the children as well? All the children?
All the adults and children. And we had to hide in the basement. And it was one street the whole town. And there was a canal in the middle. And I remember having a doll with a stone head in my hand, my only doll. And there was a bomb thrown in the canal, and my doll head broke. So I was devastated. Those are the things I remember.
you had said that there were other things that you remembered about the wartime years.
Yeah, I remember sleeping in the forest with my mother hiding away because the Germans were all over.
Hiding in the forest. Did you sleep in huts? Did you sleep under trees?
On the trees.
Did you have blankets
No.
with?
I never asked questions after the war. They spoke about it, but I didn't want to hear anything about it.
So what happened when the war ended? How did you know that was happening?
Because there was a big celebration. The tanks, the American or the Canadians came, and the kids were allowed to go on the tanks, and we had flags, and everybody was dancing.
So these
and
were...
they brought us white bread with butter that was delicious. I'll never forget that. I remember asking about my father.
And what was the answer there?
That he was coming back.
That he was coming back?
Me not coming back.
Not coming back. It must bring back a lot of memories that you don't want to remember.
I can't see any guns or soldiers or anything. I get very upset when I see that.
I always knew about the Dutch family that helped save my mother during the war, but I never put all the pieces together. Growing up Jewish, I never really understood what my parents had lived through. After my first nephew was born in 1994, when I was in my late 20s, my mother went over to a payphone and from the New Jersey hospital called minor sister, Kunira, to tell her that her grandson was born, to share that exciting news. My mother and Kunira were roughly the same age during the war and remained very close friends throughout their lives. This was a turning point in my understanding. 2 years later, in 1996, we traveled back for a family vacation with a list of people and places to see. But the first stop we made was a visit to the woman my mother called from the hospital and her family. We were met with an overwhelming number of people welcoming us and especially welcoming my mom back home. We met Kunira's 3 children, their spouses, and their children, Kunira's brothers, her sister, and the first man who took my mother and grandmother in, Hank, showed up to see my mother. It's hard to describe this trip and that moment. To meet this family, to see the farm and the places my mother had to hide were eye-opening. I understood right then and there what this incredible family had risked for mine. I understood what they meant to my mother and grandmother, and I certainly learned what they would come to mean to my sister and me. Now, it's my honor to welcome my friends and the granddaughters of those who risked so much to save my family and who I remember very much meeting on that day in 1996. Please welcome to the Locher Room, Regina de Graaf Kralaar and Janita van de Groep Kralaar.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey.
Thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome.
It means the world to me. You know that. I'm going to start with a question. You know, growing up, for me, I remember our mothers used to write letters all the time, but it really was for me, you know, when Zach, her grandson, was born and she made that phone call from the hospital. For you, what do you remember about what your mother shared with you as children about my mother and her mom?
Fifi was her big sister. I know everything she told to Fifi when something happening in the family. She called.
I'm just gonna interrupt. Fifi is my mother, because I didn't say that earlier. Yep. Fifi is my mom.
For us, it's normal. Fifi belongs in our life. The whole family knows Fifi. Yes, she grew up together in the years of life. Yeah. Dus for us, it's normal that Fifi was in our life. We know everything about you, Monique.
All the pictures your mother sent us, and when you got to your first ball or the prom for Monique, the wedding for Monique, we all saw that.
For us, first it was normal.
Mm-hmm. Did you understand what your grandparents did?
Yes.
Did they talk about that? And I mean, what is astounding, there are many non-Jewish people who saved people's lives, but your grandparents risked 11 lives, which to me is just, there are no words for that. They risked 11 people's lives to save 2 strangers.
Yeah, but the way we grew up, it was normal. Our mom told us what her dad did or has done for the other people, but we thought it was normal because you help people. And what my mom told us or taught me is always have food in the house for when there are uninvited people coming over. You always have to have food to share.
Yes,
that's what.
Yes, we also do that.
Yeah,
our house is an open house.
Yeah. So for us, it's normal.
It's long enough.
Yeah, I mean it's crazy too that Minor was 17 years old, and
Yeah, that's very young. I didn't really realize that he was so young to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I wish he was alive. I mean, first of all, to thank him in person, but did he even understand? I mean, at 17, I don't know that I would have understood that risk completely. It's an amazing thing that he asked his parents to do, and they listened.
And
I mean, that lesson alone, that they listened, is incredible. I mean,
and it was incredible because when you hear the stories, there were also German people at the farm, and they when your mother was there with your grandmother, there also were German soldiers on the.
My mother in that clip, she just spoke of being in the basement when a bomb went off and it shattered her doll. Her doll was made of stone, and she talked of that. I mean, it's really I mean, it's something. Did you ever hear it from your grandfather or grandmother?
Not from the doll. I don't know the story.
And I was
no. I just mean any of the story from your grand. Oh, were you too young when they passed away?
I was 6 when my grandfather and grandmother died.
So and I was just born, so
I only know the stories from my mother and from my uncles and my aunt, but from generation on generation.
Yes, so we that is the important lesson of all of this is the generations. Like I said, that trip in those 2 things, Zach being born and just watching her go to a payphone to call across the ocean to Holland, the first person she called, and then coming there in 96 when your mother welcomed us, her friend who was also around their age,
yes,
Tisha. Yeah, I mean, your mother's brother, sister, two brothers were there, Dawa and blanking on the other name.
Yep. From Switzerland.
Yep. From Switzerland. Yeah, from Switzerland. He was there. I mean, it really was just something to see. And then, you know, you both are raising 3 children, you know, and the lessons, you know, that it teaches them.
Yeah, we said to our children, even when some friend is in a problem, always keep the door open, to sleep, to food, to eat, to help. Yeah, to be there. Yeah, that's normal. I realized one story. I was on my bicycle from work, and I came a boy also on a bike, and he was a world trip.
Doing a world trip on his bike.
On his bike, and he said, "Can I? Do you know a place to sleep?" And to say, "Come with me. We are going home." Yeah, I never see this boy
before, and she invited the boy to eat and to come over.
To come over, and I have taken him to a party, and we had set up a stand.
Yeah,
it's normal from me. I'm very, very open,
because my mom also was like that. Yeah.
I mean, it is. You know, I said it in my telling the story. I mean, many people. I mean, I don't know what people would do today presented in the same situation. I hope they would do what your grandparents chose to do, and so many others did to save people's lives. But it's a difficult question, but one you hope people make that right choice with. And it is sickening, really, that we are, you know, 75 years since my mother talked of playing on the tank outside the farm, getting the white bread with butter, that we're still dealing with anti-Semitism and that hatred. It's really, you know,
too bad,
horrible to see, and horrible, you know, for the younger generations. That's why I think this is so important. What do you remember about, you know, when we came in 1996, that first trip as adults?
I thought it was very interesting to see you and to see Monique, because we heard a lot about you, and we saw pictures, and now you were there. We were excited. Yeah, we go to meet. That was me. Yeah.
And family from the USA.
We could say we have family in the United States. That was very interesting. That's
I completely agree, and it is family. And 2 years later, you and your girlfriend came and stayed with me, and saw New York City for the first time. And since Janita, your daughter, was here, and Nikita was supposed to come, but it is an amazing connection that, you know, the generosity your grandparents showed now, 75 years later, and for many years to come, will continue, you know. Yeah, go ahead. What were you going to say?
You're falling down. But what I was going to say, when I was, for me, we always thought it was normal what my grandparents did. But when I came to New York, then I think for me it became clearly how grateful you were to us for what our grandparents did, and we always thought it was normal. But then I got to realize that it was very
dangerous,
and it was a great thing that they did because of how you were so grateful to us. And
it took me many years as well. Like it did not, I don't know what, it took me a long time to fully understand what, Hank did, what Peter did, what your grandparents did, what Minor did, and then my mom was diagnosed with lung cancer in 2006. And one of the last things we did with her was we returned one last time to see your mom and take both of her grandsons to the farm so that they could see up close and personal what they had experienced. And look at all of us together with your families. I mean, it's really something.
It is. It sure is really something, and that is what it landed with me when I was with you in New York. Yeah. That's when it became for me a story. And and when you wanted to write to the Israel.
I'm gonna let me talk about that now. I'm gonna do that now. And so we returned to Holland in 2006 to see Janita and Regina and their families. But before my mother passed away in 2007, she sat down with me to share all she could remember in hopes that we could one day honor this family for what they had done to save her life. In 2010, I made a trip to Israel and was planning to visit the Holocaust Museum, Yad Vashem, in Jerusalem. I wrote the story down on paper with names, dates, photos, and presented it to the Garden of the Righteous Among the Nations. If approved, Yad Vashem would present the family with the prestigious honor of having their names engraved on the Wall of Honor for the Righteous. And in late April 2011, we learned that the Commission for the Designation of the Righteous had decided to award the title of Righteous Among the Nations to Regina and Janita's grandparents for help rendered to the Jewish persons during the period of the Holocaust at the risk of their own lives. And in June 2012, we all traveled back to Holland to honor their family with a ceremony at the Israeli embassy where we were able to give thanks for what they did for my mother and grandmother, and where we presented the family with a medal that has the family named engraved with the quote I mentioned at the start of the show from the Talmud: whoever saves a life saves the world. And Regina, you have the medal, right?
Yes, I've got it.
What do you remember about the ceremony?
That I was very nervous because I was supposed
to speak.
To speech for the very first time of my life. So it was. I was very nervous.
It was incredible because of how many there were. Your mother, her brother, and sister. Three of the 9 kids.
Yeah.
3 of the 9 kids. Your families, their families. There were so many grandchildren and great-grandchildren there to witness, our, still a very small way of saying thank you. But, an important, I'm so glad we were able to do it. I wish we had done it when my mom was alive, but we were still able to do it. And what did you think? I mean, did your kids or any of the kids ask questions about?
Yes, I have to ask on the teacher a day off for the children. And the teacher said, whoa, this is amazing what your grandmother and father did to that family. So take the kids with you and go. And that was very, very special. Then I realized it is a great thing what's happening today. And the children are very exciting. We have the passport.
We had a
paper.
We had to show everything at the Israel Center. It was very strictly, and the rules were very.
We did the ceremony was at the Israeli embassy, so we had to show passports and security checks and all of that.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
very official. The food, the Israeli food.
Yeah. That's what the children
remember.
And Nikita was able to tell about it at school from everything. And Victoria, she's 5 years younger. She had to get the chance to tell the story for a couple of years ago. And the children are all quiet and listened to the story because it's an interesting story. Actually, it's an interesting,
To say the least.
Yeah,
it's an interesting story, and
in Holland we have Corrie ten Boom. All the world knows Corrie ten Boom, but especially my grandfather and mother did the same. They also were a house where other Jewish people, not only your mother and her mother, your grandmother, but there were more people. They moved by the house and they gave them food and stayed for the night, and then they
went on. Yeah. They definitely. We said the word earlier. They were part of the resistance. They helped other. My mother and grandmother stayed there for a long time, but others came and went, and again, at great risk to 11 people. And again, what would you do if that happened today? It's just so important, and I can't put into words what it means, but I think hearing. I'm going to share part 2 of a clip from my mother to hear in her own words, what it means.
Was life very hard for you?
Yeah. It was lonely. But I always went back to the places I was hidden away.
To visit?
Yeah. Every vacation.
To the family on the farm?
On the farm and the other family.
That felt more like home to you than Amsterdam? Now you're still in touch with those people.
Oh, yeah.
I know. It must bring back a lot of memories that you don't want to remember.
I can't see any guns or soldiers or anything. I get very upset when I see that.
You said that you keep in touch with the families that hid you?
Yeah.
You see them?
Oh, when we go there definitely. Once in a while we call, we write.
When you think of them, what are your thoughts about them?
I like them.
Do you think of them as
like a family?
You were very, very close to them.
Yeah.
Your children know about your experiences and your husband's experiences?
Most of it, yeah.
When did you start telling them?
Well, I remember my daughter talked about it in school. And I gave her a book what I had about the concentration camps and Anne Frank. I made her read that and so I talked to her about it.
Did she ask a lot of questions?
Yes. Don't forget that.
Don't forget it. Now that you've told your story, is there anything that you would like to say about why you're telling the story?
No, because we should never forget. It should never, never happen again. And for my children and grandchildren.
What do you want them to know?
What we went through. And they should be proud to be Jews. Like we are the last ones who can talk about it. That's why I'm doing this.
Well, hearing it in her own words and how difficult it still was so long after the war. But I mean, she says it in that video, how she felt at home and safe in the places that she was hidden, and how she considered those who saved her life family. It's just hard to describe.
That's it.
And it really is. It's hard to. You could see it in my mother trying to talk about it, how hard it is. But the one thing she did get wrong, she's the last one to talk about it. Not so, because we can continue talking about it. Your children, your grandchildren, eventually. I'm gonna say thank you. Stay backstage. I will talk to you in a minute. I'm gonna sign off. You can hear me sign off, but thank you both so much for being here.
Love you. Bye.
Love you. So on that note, I would like to end the show sharing a letter that my grandmother wrote to Regina and Janita's parents, to their family, 25 years to the day that World War II ended. She wrote, "Soon it will be May 5th, 1970, and then it will be 25 years ago that we were liberated. A day of remembrance and also a day of reminiscing. I will never forget the time I spent with your family in Bunschoten, especially your warmth on our arrival on Peter's cart in the harsh cold. Our welcome was lovely with red cabbage and bacon. I can still see it before my eyes, and by the way, you, and I mean all of you, have been so kind to all of us, and we felt at home with all of you. Once again, we want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts, dear folks. Warm greetings to all of you, and lots of love from Dean." I couldn't say it better. As I leave you all today, remember, we all have choices to make in life. Speak up, do the hard thing, and let's make sure nothing like this ever happens again anywhere in the world. And please remember, whoever saves a life saves the world. Thanks for watching, everybody.